The wind screamed across the frozen wasteland like a living thing trying to tear the world apart. Doyan couldn't feel his legs anymore. He stopped noticing that about an hour ago, maybe 2. Time didn't mean much when every step might be your last. The exosuit that was supposed to keep him alive was dying. Red warning lights blinked inside his helmet, telling him things he already knew. Power at 12%. Oxygen recycler damaged. Internal temperature dropping. Left leg servo completely dead. He dragged that leg behind him like a broken piece of machinery, which is exactly what it was, behind him. Strapped to his back in a carrier he'd made from emergency supplies, 3 small aliens whimpered and cried. The sounds cut through the howling wind and straight into his heart. They were babies. Just babies. And they didn't understand why their world had ended. Doyan had found them 6 hours after the raid. The raiders had come without warning, burning everything, killing everyone. He never saw who they were. By the time his team arrived, the colony was already gone. Just flames and bodies and silence, but then he heard crying. Not human crying. Something else. Something that made his chest hurt even though he'd never heard it before. He found them in the ruins of what must have been their home. 3 small creatures covered in soft fur huddled together, making sounds that were both too high and too low for human ears to fully understand. Their parents were nearby. He didn't look at the bodies for long. His team leader had shouted at him through the radio. Doyan, we have to go now. The raiders might come back. Leave them. But he couldn't. He looked at those 3 tiny faces, those small paws reaching toward him, and he just couldn't dot, so he'd made a carrier from survival blankets and equipment webbing. He'd put them on his back. He'd started walking when his ship exploded on the landing pad, hit by a delayed explosive charge the raiders left behind. That was 3 days ago. His team was dead. His ship was scrap metal. His radio stopped working on day 2. All he had was a broken exosuit, 3 alien babies, and a memory of an old mining den from 5 years ago when he'd surveyed this region. If he could reach the den, the babies might survive until rescue came, maybe, possibly it was the only chance any of them had. The carrier on his back shifted. One of the babies was moving, trying to see around his shoulder. Doyan felt tiny claws grip his suit. The baby made a sound, questioning and afraid. It's okay, Doyan said. His voice was rough, broken from 3 days of talking to babies who couldn't understand him. We're almost there. I promise. Almost there. He didn't know if that was true. The landmarks were buried under snow. The wind changed everything. But he kept walking because stopping meant dying, and dying meant the babies died too. His medical readout was bad. Internal bleeding in his abdomen where shrapnel had hit him during the explosion. 3 broken ribs. Frostbite in his fingers and toes. The suit's medical system had done what it could, but it was designed for minor injuries. Not this. The power meter dropped to 10%. Doyan made a decision he'd made 20 times already. He diverted power from his suit's heating system to the carrier. The temperature inside his suit dropped 5 degrees. The temperature in the carrier rose 3 degrees. He could survive being cold. The babies couldn't. They were so small. Their fur was thick, but their bodies were tiny. When he'd first picked them up, he was terrified he might hurt them just by holding them wrong. Now they trusted him completely. They cried when he stopped moving. They made happy sounds when he talked to them. They slept pressed against the back of his suit. Feeling his heartbeat through the metal 8% power. The wind shifted, and for just a moment Doyan saw it. A dark shape against the white mountain. The den entrance. It was real. It was there. They were going to make it. Look, he said to the babies, knowing they couldn't understand. See that? That's home. That's safe. We're going to be okay. The smallest one made a chirping sound. Doyan felt it through the carrier straps. It sounded almost like hope. He pushed forward. His dead leg servo scraped against ice. His working leg was barely working. The suit's computer was suggesting he stop and wait for rescue. The computer didn't understand there was no rescue coming. 6% power. The den was 100 meters away. Then 80. Then 50. The babies were all awake now, sensing something was different. They made sounds to each other, little chirps and whistles, talking in a language Doyon would never understand but somehow felt he knew. They were scared, but they trusted him. They thought he could save them. He was going to save them. 30 meters. 5% power. His vision was getting blurry. The medical readout was screaming warnings about hypothermia and blood loss and oxygen deprivation. He turned off the readout. He didn't need to know. He just needed to walk. 20 meters. The smallest baby made a sound. Doyon had been listening to them for 3 days and he knew their sounds now. That was a scared sound. She knew something was wrong. "It's okay," he whispered. "Daddy's got you. I've got all of you." He didn't know where that word came from. Daddy, he'd never been a father. Never thought about it. But these 3 tiny lives trusted him completely. What else was he if not their father? 10 meters. 3% power. He could see details on the den entrance now. It was bigger than he remembered. Dark, safe. The babies would be protected from the wind there. When rescue came, they'd find them. 5 meters. The power died completely. The suit's servos locked. The helmet screen went black. All the warmth left at once. Doyon fell forward. He tried to twist, tried to protect the carrier on his back. His body hit the frozen ground hard. The impact jarred everything. He heard the babies cry out, confused and terrified. He couldn't move. The suit was dead weight now, a metal coffin. He tried to speak, to tell them it was okay, but his voice wouldn't work. Through the frosted visor, he could see the den entrance. So close, just a few more meters. The babies could crawl there if they just got out of the carrier, but his hands wouldn't move to help them. Nothing would move. The last thing Doyon heard before everything went dark was the sound of 3 babies crying, and the thought that he'd failed them after all. The carrier broke open when Doyon hit the ground. The straps that held it together, already weakened by 3 days of ice and wind, finally gave way. 3 small bodies tumbled out onto the frozen snow. Nuri landed first. She was the smallest, barely the size of a human infant, with silver-gray fur and enormous dark eyes. She rolled twice before stopping, completely confused about what had just happened. One moment she'd been warm and safe against the rumbling heartbeat. Now she was on cold white ground and everything was wrong. Hannah landed next to her, slightly bigger, with golden-brown fur and a white stripe down her back. She chirped in alarm, trying to understand. Where was the warmth? Where was the safe place? Jiho, the largest of the 3, landed on his feet by instinct. His fur was darker, almost black, and he was already showing the protective instincts of his species. He immediately went to his sisters, touching them with his nose, making soft sounds that meant, "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" All 3 looked around at the white wasteland. The wind was cold. The sky was gray. Everything was big and scary and wrong. They turned toward the last place they'd felt safe. The human was lying face down in the snow. He wasn't moving. Nuri approached first. Her small paws left tiny prints in the snow. She walked carefully toward the metal giant who had carried them for days. She didn't understand what humans were or what metal was. She only knew this being had kept her warm and safe. When everything else was terrible, she reached the helmet and pressed her tiny paws against it. The surface was cold, colder than anything should be. Through the frosted clear part she could see a face. The human's face. His eyes were closed. His lips were blue. His skin looked wrong. Nuri made a sound. It started small, a questioning chirp. "Why won't you move? Why is it cold? Where is the heartbeat?" The human didn't respond. She made the sound again, louder. It rose in pitch, becoming urgent. This was the sound Velhari cubs made when they were lost, when they needed help. When something was very wrong, Hannah heard her sister and joined in. Her cry was different, lower, but just as desperate. The 2 sounds wove together, creating a harmony that was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. Jaime stood back for a moment, his head tilted. He was trying to understand. The human had talked to them for 3 days. The human had made sounds that were comforting even though they didn't know the words. Why was the human quiet now? He approached slowly, carefully. He pressed his small body against the side of the human's helmet, where the neck would be. He was trying to feel the heartbeat. The heartbeat was always there, strong and steady. It told them everything was okay. But through all the metal and cold, he couldn't feel it. Jiho began to cry too. His voice was deeper than his sister's, and it carried further. The three cubs stood around the fallen human, crying together, their voices rising into the mountains. The sound was terrible. It was the sound of babies who didn't understand death, who only knew that their protector had stopped protecting them. It was instinct coded into their species over millions of years. When a cub cried like this, every adult within hearing distance would come running, but there were no adults. There was only wind and snow and mountains. The cubs didn't know that. They cried louder. Nuri climbed onto the human's back, trying to find the warm spot where the heartbeat was strongest. But the metal was cold everywhere. She pawed at the suit, confused. How do you open this? How do you make the warm come back? Hannah circled the human's body, looking for something, anything familiar. She found the hand, the metal fingers half buried in snow. She remembered those hands picking her up in the ruins. Gentle hands, careful hands. She pressed her face against the metal fingers and cried. Jeho was getting frantic. His instincts told him that if he cried long enough, loud enough, help would come. That's how it worked. Cubs cried and adults came, always. That was the rule of the universe. So he cried. He put everything into it, every bit of fear and confusion and desperate hope. The sound echoed off the mountain walls. It bounced back to them, making it sound like there were more cubs crying, a whole family of lost babies. The echo made them cry harder. Snow began to fall again, soft and deadly. It landed on the cub's fur, on the human suit, on everything. The temperature was dropping as evening approached. The cubs were starting to understand cold. They pressed against the human's body, trying to find warmth. There was the last heat escaping from the dying suit. They huddled there, still crying, their small bodies shaking. Nuri's voice was getting tired. The crying had become softer, more like whimpering. She was exhausted and scared, and she didn't understand why the universe had become so cruel. Hannah had stopped crying and started making a different sound, a low keening that was somehow worse than the crying. It was the sound of grief, of loss. Even though she was too young to know what those words meant, Jiho kept trying. His voice was strong, meant to carry long distances. He threw his head back and cried to the sky, to the mountains, to anyone who might hear, "Please, help, we need help." The pattern was built into his DNA. It had saved cubs for thousands of generations, but there was no one to hear. Hours passed. The cubs' cries grew weaker. They were cold now, truly cold. The warmth of their bodies was leaving. They pressed closer to the human, instinct telling them to share heat, to huddle together. Night was coming. The temperature would drop even more. The cubs didn't understand this, but their bodies did. They were shutting down, preparing to sleep, maybe forever. Nuri made one last sound, barely a whisper. It wasn't even a cry anymore. Just a sad little noise that meant I'm tired, I'm scared, I want my family. Jiho tried to stay awake. Someone had to watch. Someone had to keep crying. But his eyes were closing. He pressed against his sisters and the human, and his voice finally went quiet. The wind howled. The snow fell. 3 tiny cubs and 1 human lay at the entrance to the den, silent and still, but something had heard them. High above the planet, something had been listening. And it was coming. In the darkness, a ship descended through the atmosphere, following a sound that meant only one thing to those who heard it. Cubs in danger. Cubs who needed help. Cubs who were dying. The ship broke through the clouds, its sensors locked on the source of the crying. Inside, beings who understood exactly what that sound meant were preparing to move fast. Because for the Velhari, there was no sound in the universe more important than the cry of cubs who needed help. And these cubs had cried until the mountains themselves echoed with their pain. Captain Murray stood on the bridge of the rescue ship with her ears pointed forward, listening to something that made her entire body tense. The sound was coming through the ship's sensors, amplified and cleaned up, but still heartbreaking. Cubs crying. The distress call of her people. And it was coming from the dead colony below. How many? she asked, her voice tight. The sensor officer, a young male named Taijin, checked his readings. 3 signatures, Captain. Velhari cubs? Young? Very young? He paused. They've been crying for hours. Murray's claws extended involuntarily. Hours. Those poor babies had been alone and terrified for hours. Any adult signatures? No, Captain. Just the cubs. The bridge went silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The cubs' parents were dead. Everyone at the colony was dead. Somehow, 3 babies had survived the raid that killed everyone else. Take us down, Murray ordered. Emergency descent? I don't care about the storm. Her second officer, Bora, stepped forward. Bora was older, careful, the kind who thought about rules and regulations. Captain, the weather is dangerous. Wind shears, ice buildup, visibility near 0. We should wait for those are cubs, Bora. Murray's voice was hard. Our cubs, crying alone in the dark. We do not wait. Bora looked at her captain, then at the sensor display showing 3 tiny life signs in the frozen wasteland. She nodded. Yes, Captain. Taking us down. The ship shuddered as it hit the atmosphere. The storm grabbed at them immediately, throwing the ship sideways. Warning alarms blared. The pilot, Daiyun, fought the controls with all 4 hands, his fur standing on end with stress. I've got them, he said through clenched teeth. Descending through 8,000 meters. 7,000. This storm is bad, Captain. Really bad. Murray watched the sensors. The cubs' signals were getting weaker. The crying had almost stopped. That was worse than the crying. That meant they were giving up. Faster, she said, on the ground. Jiho's eyes opened. He didn't remember closing them. Everything was white and cold and wrong. He tried to make a sound, but his throat was too tired. His sisters were pressed against him, barely breathing, but something was different. Something in the air. A feeling. A vibration. His ears, small and still developing, picked up a new sound. Not wind, not the echo of their own crying. Something else. Something coming from the sky. He lifted his head, which felt impossibly heavy. He looked up through the falling snow and saw lights. Moving lights. Getting closer, Jiho made a sound. It was weak, barely there, but it was hope. He nudged Nuri with his nose, trying to wake her. Look, something is coming. Nuri didn't wake. She was too far gone. Jiho tried Hana. His bigger sister stirred slightly, made a small questioning sound, but couldn't open her eyes. The lights were closer now. Jiho could feel the vibration through the ground. It was getting stronger. He tried to cry again, to call out to whatever was coming, but his voice wouldn't work properly. All that came out was a weak chirp. On the human suit, a small light began to blink. Red, steady, weak. Jiho had been playing with the human's equipment earlier, pawing at the interesting buttons and lights. He'd accidentally activated something. Now that something was sending out a signal. Captain, Taijin called out. I'm picking up an emergency beacon. Human signature. Same location as the cubs. Murray's ears swiveled back in surprise. Human? What's a human doing here? Unknown. The beacon is weak, almost dead. But it's definitely human technology. This didn't make sense. The colony was Velhari. Why would a human be there? But there was no time to think about it. Mark the location. Both signals. We're going in. The ship descended through the clouds. Ice built up on the hull, scraped off by heating elements. Wind tried to push them into the mountain. Daiyun was sweating, his hands moving constantly, correcting, adjusting, fighting. 500 meters, he called out. 400. 300. I see the mountain. There's a flat area near the coordinates. I can set us down there. Do it, Murray ordered. She was already moving toward the airlock, pulling on her thermal suit. Bora and 4 others followed her, including Kang Min, their best medic. The ship touched down hard, bouncing once before settling. Before the landing gear fully deployed, Murray was at the airlock. Open it! The door opened and freezing wind blasted in. Mireille jumped down into the snow, her thermal suit protecting her from the worst of the cold. Her helmet light cut through the falling snow. Spread out! Find them, the cubs first. The team fanned out, following their helmet sensors. The crying had stopped completely now. That terrified Mireille more than anything. Silent cubs were dying cubs. Here. Bora's voice came through the radio. Captain, I found them. They're... Oh no. Oh no, Mireille ran through the snow, her powerful legs carrying her quickly. She came around a large ice formation and stopped. Her breath catching, 3 tiny cubs were huddled against a large metal shape. A human in an exosuit lying face down in the snow. The cubs were pressed against the human's body, their fur covered in frost. Their small chests barely moving, but it was the human's position that made Mireille's heart clench. Even fallen, even motionless, the human's arms were positioned around the cubs, protecting them. Even in death, this human had tried to shield them. Kang Min. Now? Mireille shouted. The medic ran forward, his scanner already out. He passed it over the cubs first. All 3 alive. Hypothermic, shutting down, but alive. We can save them. Thora was already gently picking up the cubs, wrapping them in thermal blankets. They made weak sounds, confused little noises. They tried to reach back toward the human. What about the human? Mireille asked, though she thought she knew the answer. No one could survive this cold in a dead suit. Kangman moved his scanner to the human. He frowned. Scanned again. Captain. He's alive. What? Barely, he's dying. Multiple organ failure, extreme hypothermia, critical injuries. But his heart is still beating. Kangman looked up at his captain, his eyes wide. How is this possible? He should be dead. He should have been dead days ago. Mireille knelt beside the human. She could see frost inside the helmet visor. She could see the blue lips, the closed eyes. She activated her suit's medical scanner, running a more detailed check. The data made her feel sick. This human had been dying slowly for days. Internal bleeding, broken bones, frostbite, and the suit's power log showed something that made her understand everything. He diverted power from his own life support to keep the cubs warm, she said quietly. Multiple times. Dozens of times. He was killing himself to keep them alive. The team was silent. Bora held the 3 cubs against her chest. They were warming up, starting to move more. The smallest one, Nuri, made a sound and reached toward the human. We need to decide, Kangman said. The cubs will live if we get them to the ship now. But the human... Captain, I can't treat him. I'm not trained in human physiology. And our medical laws... I know the laws, Mireille said. She looked at the human, then at the cubs. The cubs who were alive because this human had given everything to save them. In Velhari culture, there was no greater honor than protecting cubs. Cubs were sacred. Cubs were the future. Anyone who saved cubs was a hero beyond question. This human had saved 3 cubs while dying himself. He'd carried them for days. He'd frozen so they could be warm. He'd walked until his body broke completely and the cubs had chosen him. They'd stayed with him. They'd cried for him. In Velhari culture, cubs knew. Cubs could sense who was safe, who was family. These cubs had accepted this human as their protector. Mireille made her decision. Load him on the ship, she ordered. Carefully. We saved them both. Captain, the medical regulations. The cubs chose him, Mireille said firmly. They accepted him as their guardian. By our oldest laws, that makes him family. We don't abandon family. Load him now. That's an order. The team moved quickly. They lifted the human with extreme care, his frozen suit making him heavy. The cubs cried out, trying to reach him. Bora had to hold them back gently. Soon, little ones, she whispered to them. You'll see him soon. I promise. They carried the human to the ship. Behind them in the snow were the marks where he'd fallen. The place where 3 cubs had cried until their voices echoed. Through the mountains, the place where one human had. Proven that heroism wasn't about species or training or equipment. It was about Seeing someone who needed help and deciding that nothing, not even death, would stop you from trying to save them. The medical bay of the Velhari rescue ship was designed for Velhari physiology. Everything from the scanning equipment to the medical databases to the treatment pods was built for beings with fur, claws, and different internal biology than humans. Kangman stood over the human, his four hands moving quickly, trying to adapt equipment that wasn't designed for this. The human was out of the exosuit now, lying on a medical bed that was slightly too small for him. His skin was gray. His breathing was shallow and irregular. The scanner readings were barely holding steady. "I need human medical data," Kangman said urgently. "Captain, I can see what's wrong, but I don't know how to fix it. Human blood chemistry is different. Their organs work differently. If I give him the wrong treatment, I could kill him faster." Myre was at a terminal, searching through their database. "We have basic human medical information from the Alliance records. Uploading to your station now." Data flooded Kangman's screens. Basic human anatomy. Blood types. Common treatments. It was something, but not enough. Not nearly enough for someone this badly injured. In the corner of the medical bay, Bora sat with the three cubs. They were in a warming pod designed for young Velhari. The pod was working perfectly. The cubs' body temperatures were rising. Their breathing was steadying. They were going to be fine, but they wouldn't stop looking at the human. Nuri kept making questioning sounds. "Where is he? Why can't we go to him?" She tried to climb out of the warming pod twice. Bora had to gently push her back in. "He's sick, little one," Bora said softly. "The healer is helping him. You need to stay warm." But Nuri didn't want to stay warm. She wanted the human. She started to cry again, that same heartbreaking sound that had echoed through the mountains. Hannah joined in. And then Jiho, the three cubs cried together, reaching toward the human on the medical bed. The sound made Kangman's ears flatten against his head. Every instinct screamed at him to comfort the cubs, to fix whatever was wrong. But what was wrong was that their chosen guardian was dying, and Kangman didn't know how to save him. "Talk to me, Kangman," Murray said. "What do we have?" The medic checked his scanner results again. Severe internal bleeding in the abdomen. 3 broken ribs, 1 puncturing the lung. Advanced hypothermia. Frostbite in extremities. Multiple organ systems failing. He paused. "Captain, even with our technology, even if he was Velhari, this would be difficult. But he's human. I don't know if his body will accept our medical nanits. I don't know if our healing tissue will bond with his. I don't know if our medicines will help or poison him." Murray's claws tapped against the terminal. "What about stasis? Can we put him in medical stasis until we reach a human facility? He's too far gone? Putting him in stasis now would kill him. He needs treatment now, not later." Kangman looked at his captain, his ears drooping. "I'm sorry, Captain. I don't think I can save him." The cubs cried louder. They somehow knew, somehow understood that the being who had protected them was slipping away. Myre walked over to the medical bed. She looked down at the human. He was young, she realized. Younger than she'd thought. Maybe 30 standard years? Just a young male who'd made a choice to save 3 babies. Instead of himself, she pulled up the exosuit's data logs on her pad. She wanted to understand. She needed to know who this human was. The logs told a story that made her throat tight. The human's name was Doyun. He was a rescue specialist. Part of a human exploration team investigating the attack on the colony. His team had orders to evacuate immediately if the raiders were still in the area, but Doyun had found the cubs. The logs showed his vital signs over 3 days. She could see when he first picked them up. His heart rate had spiked. The medical AI in his suit had noted elevated stress and emotional response. The suit recommended he leave the cubs and evacuate. He overrode the recommendation. She watched his vitals over the journey. Every few hours he would divert power from his life support to the cubs' carrier. Every time the suit's AI would warn him. Life support critical. Oxygen levels dangerous. Temperature too low? Return power to primary systems. He ignored every warning she saw when he shut down the medical system to save power for the cubs. His injuries were worsening and he turned off the only thing treating them. The AI protested. He overrode it. On day 2, his teammates' distress signals went silent. His ship exploded. He was alone. The suit AI suggested he find shelter and wait for rescue. He kept walking. On day 3, his vitals became critical. Organ failure, hypothermia. The suit AI declared that continuation of current activity would result in death. Recommendation? Stop, rest, preserve remaining life. His response was logged in text. Not without them. We're almost there. Just a little further. And he kept walking until his body completely gave out. Mireille set down the pad. Her hands were shaking. She looked at Kang Min. He knew he was dying. For days he knew. And he kept going. Why? Kang Min asked, genuinely confused. They're not his species. Not his cubs? Why would he sacrifice himself? Mireille thought about that. She thought about what she knew of humans. They were newer to the galaxy, still figuring out their place. They were tough, stubborn, sometimes violent. But they were also capable of incredible kindness to species not their own. Because they needed him, she said finally. And that was enough. The cubs were still crying. Their distress was making the whole medical bay feel wrong. Laura was trying to comfort them, but they wanted their human. An idea came to Mireille. Maybe a crazy idea. Maybe an idea that would get her in trouble with medical regulations. But maybe an idea that would work. The cubs, she said. They bonded with him. They accepted him as a guardian. Kang Min nodded. Yes, clearly. The bonding is strong. Our medical technology works better when there's an emotional connection. When family is close, that's why we allow cubs in medical bays during treatment. The emotional bond helps healing. Yes, but Captain, he's not Valhari. The cub's presence won't affect his. We don't know that, Mireille interrupted. We don't know how human biology responds to emotional connections. Maybe it's different. Maybe it's the same. Maybe the cubs being close will help. Kang Min's ears perked up. You want to bring the cubs to him? Yes, if they're bonded, if he's accepted them as his responsibility, then maybe that bond works both ways. Maybe some part of him will fight harder if they're close. It wasn't scientific. It wasn't standard procedure. But Kang Min looked at the dying human and the crying cubs and decided he didn't care about procedure. Bring them over, he said. Bora carried the 3 cubs to the medical bed. As soon as they were close to Doyon, their crying changed. It became softer, more questioning. Nuri reached out with one small paw and touched his hand. His fingers twitched. Just slightly. Just a tiny movement, but the medical scanner caught it. Heart rate increased by 2 beats per minute. Brain activity increased slightly. His body was responding. Put them on the bed with him, Kang Min said. Carefully. Bora placed the cubs next to Doyon's body. They immediately pressed against him, seeking the warmth and heartbeat they remembered. Nuri curled against his neck. Hana pressed against his chest. Jiho settled near his wounded side, being careful without understanding why. The cubs' crying stopped. They made soft, comforting sounds instead. The sounds Valhari cubs made when they felt safe, and on the scanner, Doyon's vitals improved. Not much, not enough to save him yet. But his heart rate steadied. His breathing deepened slightly. His brain activity showed patterns consistent with someone fighting to stay alive. It's working, Kang Min whispered. I don't understand it, but it's working. He's fighting for them, Mireille said. Even unconscious, he knows they need him. So he's fighting. Kang Min began to work with new confidence. He used human medical data as a guide, but trusted his instincts for the rest. He introduced their medical nanites slowly, watching for rejection. None came. The nanites began repairing damaged tissue, working slower than they would in a Valhari body, but working nonetheless. He used healing tissue on the worst injuries. It bonded, not perfectly, but well enough. He adjusted the treatment pod settings. creating a hybrid protocol that was part human medicine, part Valhari medicine, part pure guesswork, and the cubs stayed pressed against their human, purring softly, reminding him without words that they needed him to survive. Hours passed. Doyen's vitals continued to improve. Slowly, impossibly slowly, but improving. As dawn broke outside the ship, Kangmin finally stepped back from the medical bed. He looked exhausted, but he was smiling. "He's stable," he said. "Actually stable. He's going to need extensive treatment, months of recovery. But he's going to live." Murray felt something in her chest unclench. "You did it?" "We all did it," Kangmin said, looking at the cubs. "Especially them. I think they saved him as much as he saved them." On the bed, Doyen's breathing was steady. His color was better. And 3 small cubs slept peacefully against him, finally knowing that their protector would wake up. 6 months later, Doyen opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was soft blue, not white like human medical facilities. The air smelled different too, like flowers he'd never encountered. And there was a weight on his chest, warm and purring. He tried to move his head and felt muscles respond. That was new. Last time he'd been conscious, nothing had worked. He managed to look down at his chest. 3 small furry faces looked back at him. The cubs. They were bigger now, not tiny babies anymore, but still young. Their eyes went wide when they saw he was awake. Then they exploded into motion and sound. All 3 began chirping and purring at once, climbing over him, touching his face with small paws, making sounds that were clearly excited and happy. "Hey," Doyen said, his voice rough from months of not using it. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here. I'm okay." The cubs didn't understand his words, but they understood his voice. They pressed against him, purring louder. Nuri, still the smallest, climbed up to his shoulder and nuzzled against his neck. Hana patted his face with her paws as if making sure he was real. Jiho, now almost twice the size he'd been, made a deep rumbling sound that was pure contentment. The door to the medical room opened. A Valhari female entered, tall and graceful with silver fur and intelligent eyes. She stopped when she saw Doyen was awake, then her face broke into a smile. "You're awake," she said in perfect human standard language. "We were beginning to wonder if you ever would. Where am I?" Doyen asked. His memories were foggy. He remembered the den, the cold, falling. After that, nothing. "You're on a Valhari medical station. I'm Captain Murray. My team found you and the cubs 6 months ago on Theta Prime." She walked closer, her movements careful and non-threatening. "Do you remember what happened?" Doyen looked at the cubs, at their healthy, happy faces. "The raid. I found them in the ruins. Their parents were ... double quote he couldn't finish. Dead, Murray said gently. The whole colony was lost. You and these 3 cubs are the only survivors? My team? I'm sorry. They didn't make it either. Doyen closed his eyes. He'd known on some level. But hearing it confirmed still hurt. He felt a small paw on his hand and opened his eyes. Nuri was looking at him, her eyes full of concern. She made a questioning sound. I'm okay, he told her softly. Just sad? She understands more than you think, Murray said. They all do. They've been waiting for you to wake up. They visit every day, stay as long as we let them, then cry when it's time to leave. The foster families have been very patient. Foster families? We found homes for them. Temporary ones, but... Murray hesitated. This is complicated. May I sit? Doyen nodded. The captain pulled up a chair beside his bed. The cubs repositioned themselves, clearly comfortable with her presence. What you did, Murray began. Carrying the cubs for 3 days while you were dying. Sacrificing your own survival to keep them warm. In my culture, that is the highest honor possible. Protecting cubs is sacred to us. I couldn't leave them, Doyen said simply. They were babies. They needed help. Yes, but they weren't your species. They weren't your responsibility. You had orders to evacuate. You chose to save them anyway. Murray leaned forward. Our medical laws normally forbid treating other species. Our technology is specific to our biology, but the cubs wouldn't leave you. When we found you, they were pressed against you, trying to keep you warm the way you'd kept them warm. They'd bonded with you. Bonded? It's a Valhari concept. Cubs choose their guardians, their family. It's instinctive. They choose who is safe, who will protect them. These three chose you? Mare smiled. In our oldest laws, when cubs choose a guardian from outside the family, that being becomes family. You became their family when they decided you were. So treating you wasn't breaking our medical laws. It was honoring them. Doyan looked at the three cubs. Jiho had fallen asleep against his side. Hannah was grooming Nuri's fur. They looked so peaceful, so trusting. What happens now? He asked. That's what we need to discuss. Mire pulled out a datapad. You've been big news. The human who nearly died saving alien cubs. It's been all over both our networks. Your people want you home. They've been calling you a hero. Doyan shook his head. I'm not a hero. I just did what anyone would do. No, Mare said firmly. Most wouldn't. Most would have followed orders and evacuated. Most would have chosen their own survival. You chose 3 babies who weren't even your species. That's heroism? She set the datapad on the bed. Here's the situation. The cubs are legally orphans. In Valhari law, orphaned cubs must be placed with family if any exists. The cubs' extended family all died in the raid, so they would normally go to foster families permanently, but they've bonded with you. They've accepted you as their guardian, and our oldest laws say that bond is sacred. If you wanted... She paused. If you wanted, you could petition for guardianship. The cubs have already chosen you. Under our law, that choice matters more than species. Doyan stared at her. You're saying I could adopt them? In a sense, yes. You would be their guardian. It's never been done with a human before. There would be complications. You'd need to live part of the time in Valhari space so they can be raised in their culture. You'd need to learn our language and customs. And humans don't live as long as Valhari, so eventually they would outlive you. Mire met his eyes. It wouldn't be easy. But if you want them, they're yours. They've already decided that. Doyan looked down at the cubs. Nuri had woken up and was watching him with those big, dark eyes. She reached up with one paw and touched his face gently. He thought about his life before. He'd been alone mostly. Dedicated to his work. No real family. Few close friends. He'd been okay with that. It had been enough, but now he looked at these 3 small beings who cried for him until mountains echoed. Who'd refused to leave him even when he fell. Who'd stayed pressed against him, keeping him warm the way he'd kept them warm. He thought about walking through the blizzard. One step at a time, knowing he was dying, but knowing he had to get them to safety. He remembered whispering to them that it would be okay. He remembered calling himself their daddy without even thinking about it. They'd chosen him. And somewhere in that frozen wasteland he'd chosen them too. Yes, he said. I want them. If they'll have me. Nuri chirped happily. Hannah climbed onto his lap and settled there like she'd done it 1,000 times. Jiho opened one eye, made a satisfied rumbling sound, and went back to sleep. Mire smiled. I think that's your answer. They've been yours since the moment you picked them up in those ruins. You just needed to catch up. The next months were hard but good. Doyan had to relearn how to walk, how to use his hands properly. The Valhari medicine had saved him but left him weak. Physical therapy was painful and frustrating, but the cubs were there every day. They'd play carefully around him, bringing him things they thought he'd like. Rocks, leaves, random objects they found interesting. They'd curl up with him when he was tired. They'd make happy sounds when he made progress. He started learning Valhari language. It was difficult, full of sounds humans couldn't quite make properly. But he tried. The cubs thought it was hilarious when he mispronounced things. They'd correct him patiently, repeating the sound over and over until he got close enough. He learned about their culture. about the importance of family and cubs, about their history and values. He learned that what he'd done, sacrificing himself for their cubs, had made him more than just accepted in Velhari society. He'd become a symbol of what they valued most. Other species were watching too. The story had spread far beyond just humans and Velhari. The human who nearly died saving alien babies. It became a story about what people could be at their best. About choosing compassion over survival. About family that went beyond species. One day, 9 months after waking up, Doyan was finally cleared to leave the medical station. He stood at the door, the cubs at his feet, Mireille beside him. "Ready?" she asked. "Where do we go?" Doyan asked. He had no ship, no home, no plan. "Wherever you want," Mireille said. "You're a Velhari citizen now. Honorary but official. You can live here or on Earth or anywhere that will accept a human with 3 Velhari cubs. I think you'll find most places will." Nuri tugged on his pant leg, making questioning sounds. "Are we leaving? Where are we going?" Doyan picked her up, then scooped up Hannah and Jiho with his other arm. They were getting big, but he was getting stronger. They settled against him, purring. "We're going home," he told them. Then he looked at Mireille. "Wherever that is. We'll figure it out together." They walked out into a new life. A human and 3 Velhari, cubs who'd saved each other on a frozen mountain. 20 years passed. The monument on Theta Prime was finished. It stood at the entrance to the old mining den, exactly where Doyan had fallen, and the cubs had cried until the mountains echoed. The statue showed a human in an exosuit, kneeling with 3 small cubs at his feet. The human's hand was extended toward them in protection. The cubs were looking up at him in trust. The inscription was in both human standard and Velhari. It read, "He fell so they could rise. He gave everything so they could live. This is humanity. This is family. This is love beyond species." Doyan stood before the monument, now older, grayer. Beside him stood 3 adult Velhari. Nuri, small but fierce, worked as an ambassador. Hannah, gentle and wise, was a teacher of interspecies relations. Jiho, strong and protective,